The 1st Battalion, the Hampshire Regiment, is widely recognised as the first British infantry unit to land on D-Day at Gold Beach at 07:25 hours on June 6, 1944. As part of the 231st Brigade, 50th Infantry Division, they spearheaded the assault at Hamel, suffering heavy casualties while capturing key enemy positions and taking the small port of Arromanch, which was to be used for the Mulberry Harbour. The commanding officer during landings on Gold Beach, Lieutenant Colonel H.D. Nelson Smith MC, was wounded in the initial assault. This account uses contemporary film together with his own words to describe the landings. The Hampshires were chosen not because of their elaborate traditions or battle honours, but because they were considered journeymen who would get the job done.
Sicily and Italy, again we were front troops, and a very different cup of tea, because we were landed all over the place, but the opposition, by comparison, it was very light. We had Sicilians on the first one, obviously. They were holding the coastline, whereas the Hermann Goering division was inland, just waiting to see where we landed. Much the same happened in Italy. We landed at night in Little Bay. There was nobody there at all, in fact.
Before D-Day, the Hampshires were based in a transit or sausage camp in the New Forest between Lyndhurst and Beaulieu. Like the rest of the Northumbrian Division, in preparation for D-Day, they practiced a number of landings along beaches on the south coast, codenamed Operation Fabius.
Main exercises were done when we were located in the New Forest, and we were first of all near Lyndhurst, and later we moved down near Beaulieu Abbey. There were 4 major exercises that we literally went through the procedure, marching down through Southampton, embarking onto troop ships, and then 3 were in Studland Bay, and 1 I think was on Hayling Island. And of course the result was that the inhabitants by the 5th and genuine embarkation took absolutely no notice of us. It was just another exercise as far as they were concerned.
Eventually, on June 6, 1944, D-Day arrived, yet in the initial stages it appeared as though the worst enemy was going to be the weather.
Owing to bad weather, the worst in June for 20 years, D-Day had been postponed 24 hours by General Eisenhower. The soldiers had been living in cramped conditions on board their troop ships for the previous 5 days. It was the weather which was again to play a devastating part on D-Day itself. As the soldiers embarked at 6 a.m. into their small 10-men assault craft, 7 miles from the Normandy coast, there was still a 4-foot sea running and very poor visibility. When about 4 miles away, the coast could be seen dimly through the haze, and morale was raised by the roar of the naval guns in close support. Heavy concentrations of fire by the Royal Navy ships and RAF bombers on the German defences had been planned to take place before the landings. However, due to bad visibility, all this bombardment overshot, and the enemy positions escaped untouched, including those at Hamel, as we're soon to find out.
Lieutenant Colonel H.D. Nelson Smith goes on to describe the sandbars and cross-currents that also seemed to conspire against the landings.
Several landing craft encountered sandbars on which they grounded. Thinking this was the beach proper, our naval crews lowered the ramps, and the leading troops jumped out into 6 foot of water. In their heavy equipment, they sank like stones. Some others, struggling on the surface, were then run over by their own craft, which surged forward with its lightened load. Because of the weather, the tide was much higher at this hour than normal, and it helped to hide many of the underwater beach obstacles, which were sharp steel rods with mines lashed to them. Finally, there was a strong cross-current, and instead of our companies assaulting Hamel from the front, they found themselves landed 200 yards further down the beach in a disastrous crossfire situation.
Despite the best preparations, things do not always go according to plan.
The Hampshires had 4 rifle companies as their main assault troops. 2 were to make a direct frontal attack against the main defensive position at Hamel, a small coastal village on a headland. Here the Germans had built a large concrete hospital come strong point, and a number of fortified houses and pillboxes. These had commanding views both out to sea and along the invasion beaches. The 2 other companies were to attack further along the beach, through barbed wire fences and minefields, and across the sand dunes, and then capture the town of Asnell, a mile inland. As the assault troops closed to within 100 yards of the beach, the first enemy fire was met, but no casualties resulted. It was still the sea that remained the main problem at this stage.
Lieutenant Colonel H.D. Nelson Smith describes how the Hampshires were, as he says, on their own in the early stages of the landings, facing intense enemy fire.
Much needed support in the form of artillery and amphibious tanks, and more specialized ones called flails, designed to beat a path through the minefields, were scheduled to land with our troops at this time. Also, Royal Marine assault craft with small cannons aboard were to silence the enemy positions as the attack went in. None of this support arrived in the early stages of the beach battle, and the infantry were on their own. Intense enemy fire swept the beaches as the troops touched down. It was found impossible to capture Hamel from the beach. Later, following the fall of Asnell, it was attacked from the rear in the early afternoon, the Germans resisting to the bitter end. The beach was then clear for others to land.
The Hampshires had to learn to adapt to their changing circumstances.
I remember telling those troops we would be only finding rubble, barbed wire, and a lot of wrecked defences, because this bombardment was most impressive planning. I merely dismiss it as naval and air force and this and that on this thing. On paper and on planning, it looked as if the enemy Atlantic wall was going to be completely shattered. Owing again, as I say, to the weather, nothing from the air got there. The Navy nor the Air Force got a single hit on the coastal defences. And then, because of the tide and the rough seas, the tanks, they were called DD tanks. They had a great sort of canopy around the top of the tank to stop water getting in. And they were supposed to land with us. They sank. And the artillery were also in an open craft and was supposed to be firing on the way in. They never turned up. We would have thought in their launches these Royal Marine commandos who were dead behind us and firing like crazy, or supposed to fire like crazy at short range at the enemy defences would be there, but they weren't either. And as I say, the whole planning went to hell because of the rough sea. And that's really why our casualties were so high. In 12 hours we suffered 60 officers and men killed and 120 injured. Despite all their setbacks and heavy casualties, the Hampshires went on to capture their final D-Day objective right on schedule that evening.
These objectives included a number of heavily defended strongpoints and a radar station along a 5-kilometre stretch of the Normandy coast, as well as the strategically significant port of Arromanches, which was to be the base for the British Mulberry artificial floating harbour until a deep water port could be captured. The story goes that when the acting commander on the day was approached by the officer in charge of the operation, he was concerned because of the number of casualties suffered by the Hampshires, when not all the objectives were achieved. Instead, the officer congratulated the Hampshires for their remarkable achievement in the face of the most challenging circumstances as the spearhead for the British Army on D-Day. In 1946, the Hampshires wartime service was officially recognised when the status of the regiment was changed to the Royal Hampshire Regiment.